Light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. With me today on the show, I have my friend Vendella Sawyer, and we've had lots of really intriguing conversations on lots of complex subjects, but one that I don't think gets talked about enough, even as it unfolds right under our very noses, is the role of the military. There were times in the past, a lot of people would like to say less civilized times, where the soldier was one of the common roles in society just as much as a grocer or a farmer or a priest or a mayor or whatever. A soldier was just one more role. I suppose in some ways those times didn't usually have a regular police force, and so the soldier was kind of both, police and whatever military action might come up. As much as one would like to think that it was, the idealists among us, I guess, like to think of the military as being purely defensive, but I don't know that it's ever been that way. It seems like there's certain parts of the world where things remain unstable, and in those parts of the world, I would imagine that the archetype or the role of the soldier is a more constant phenomena within those societies. In the United States, there has been a long time where whatever wars were going on, Vietnam and such, were sufficiently peripheral that I don't know that it really affected the general American psyche. It seems like we're moving back into a time, though, where there are so many wars going on and so many military conflicts in which the United States is now involved, and so many people who, what some people call the economic draft, that when there's no other jobs, well, the military is always hiring. It seems to me, though, that the attitude toward the military shifted radically after the Second World War.
You have to...
Does that not seem the case to you?
No. The case to me is World War I, we won. As far as the military is concerned, we won World War II.
Okay.
After the Korean War, and then leading up into the Vietnam War, and
Okay.
all the other wars that we've had now, up until this day, are not based the same because we basically didn't win.
So the measure of a war is whether or not you win.
My opinion as a military brat, and my father being in the service, and my beliefs are, it's always that the United States had to win. I look at it this way.
Okay.
The United States was not attacked by China during
Okay.
World War II. We were attacked by an island of Japan. It took our usage from the German war with their scientists and stuff to create the atomic bomb. So the United States is the first to use the atomic bomb. If Hitler might have won, he may have used it first. But
Okay.
even though we bombed the small island of very strong-minded people and of good heritage and thought, my point is, we bombed them and they recovered
Okay.
immensely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So bringing that back to the home front in terms of how do we view a soldier.
Now,
Up until World War II, it's my understanding that it was honorable because there was an obvious evil to be fighting. It seems like the majority of the wars since that time have been more economically and politically motivated than really clearly identifying any particular danger.
we have to also remember we're back to the same subject again. The United States is the force, so we say. But
The force.
The force. We are
The major world power, or
major world power, like the Romans, the Greeks, the Egyptians, the Russians. All have had their, where they were here, even England.
their turn of being empire builders.
Right. And now the United States considers itself the almighty, in my opinion. And when soldiers came back from Korea...
Which to me is problematic.
Correct, I agree with you about that. It is problematic. But
I would like to think that we could get past the age of empires in human evolution and move on to becoming a peaceful global community. If we were going to move in that direction, though, it still leaves me, at least personally, struggling with the question of what do we do with this soldier in the midst of a society that we want to move toward peaceful global community. On one hand, I think the soldier needs to be respected as a human being who's doing the best that he or she can. On the other hand, the citizens are often at odds with their governments who are giving the soldiers orders that are at the very least controversial.
And the soldiers don't have an opinion. They're given an order and they're expected to do it.
And they're expected to do it.
But that doesn't mean that they don't go home or discuss between themselves or with their families on how they feel about the subject.
Mm-hmm. And they have to know at what point is it simply a wrong order that they should not obey. Because if we hide behind the excuse, I was just following orders, we're no better than the Nazis at the trials at Nuremberg.
Correct.
And so, who it was I was talking with? I think it was somebody from Germany who said that in their military training, a very key point is recognizing a wrong order and knowing when to say, no, I will not do this. You know, whether it's defiance of the Geneva Conventions, bombing civilians who have no military anything. There are, the Geneva Conventions, from what little I understand of them, not being a military person, is this international agreement about what constitutes, if you can say such a thing, it sounds ridiculous, ethical war practices.
That's correct, but it's not being done.
But it's not what?
It's not being done.
It's not being followed.
It's not being funded, it's not being followed, and it's not being done. What the Geneva Convention set down was a set of rules for each government to agree upon.
So that war itself would have some reasonable limitations.
Or constitution. Like, when I say constitution, I put it this way.
Composition?
No, constitution. A constitution of boundaries. If I'm a German soldier,
okay,
I was supposed to be treated by the Geneva Convention by a certain way. Certain things you couldn't do to me. And for
such as torture.
Correct. And also, with the American soldiers, even though we were fighting the Germans, it was also supposed to be said that we were supposed to be treated this way. Mm-hmm. But that's not the way it went. That's not the way it happened. And that's not the way it happens today.
And it's important to remember that even if your adversary is being inhumane and not following the Geneva Conventions or whatever moral code you want to specify, it's not about being only a reflection of your adversary. It's about demonstrating what kind of person you are. And so, to me, I would argue for military being defensive only and maintaining a well thought out definition of civility throughout that process. That even if the adversary is torturing our shoulders, we're not going to torture theirs because we don't believe in that kind of behavior. And the fact that they do it doesn't make it right for us to do it.
No, but you have to remember the military structure. You have the generals and everyone else that falls in line, and then you're told to do this and you're told to do that. Now, we've gotten since the 60s where we've had military soldiers stand their ground on certain subjects, even like it's like the women. My sister did 15 years.
When you say stand their ground, you're referring to?
In other words, if there's something that they truly object to, they will stand their ground to enough all the way to a court-martial to prove their point. But that's very rarely done. It's the same as today.
Well, thank goodness it's rarely necessary. Well, at least
it's more necessary to me now because we don't fight because Germany was doing this or that. We were bombed at Pearl Harbor. It's now to me, as a military brat, being when I say military brat, as a child being brought up as a military kid.
Okay.
Okay, when I was a military kid, I was told every base that my father lived on. And we never always lived on the military base due to our rank. Since I was the oldest child, I was told by the commander in a class of kids my same age, all kids were the oldest, that you are a representative of the United States, just as your father is. Your actions are going to affect your father and will reflect our opinion of wherever we're stationed at with the people that we're involved with, like when we were in Korea.
So when you were stationed in Korea, Koreans would use you as a reference for what Americans are like.
I had to do exactly as my father and uphold a standard of how I should act, be appropriate, not be defensive. And I've heard that even in the United States when we were stationed in, when we were here in the mainland in the United States, I've heard it all my life.
When you say not be defensive, though, what you're referring to is when somebody wants to make a negative accusation about it.
I can't make a remark.
Well, I was going to say, instead of being, oh, no, no, absolutely not, whatever, it's got to be a patient sort of, it reminds me of the phrase that some people will sometimes joke about conversations, why do I always have to be the grown-up? When somebody makes a wild accusation that is in a sense childish because it's ignorant and not mature, that you have to be the grown-up to say, this is what you need to understand about the situation. And this is why it's being done, this is the rationale that was used, this is the structure, the administrative structure that's in place. If you have a complaint, this is how you lodge it, and to create understanding.
But you have to understand, it doesn't just affect, okay, let's say the state of Colorado, when we were here.
When
we were stationed here in Colorado.
Okay, your family was in Colorado.
When we were stationed in Colorado. When we were stationed here in Colorado, I'm going to public school. As a military child, I had a certain way that I was supposed to uphold myself.
Okay, which was probably better than what your other classmates were expected to do.
Yes, but they tested me. We all got tested. All military kids, they challenged us because they...
Not officially, but socially.
Socially. They knew what we could do, what we could say, and what we couldn't do. Because if I got in a fight at school...
They knew you weren't allowed to hit back.
Correct, and then my father would also be in trouble because of what I did, no matter what the circumstances were. That's not what they wanted to hear. All they wanted to hear was that you knew that you were not supposed to conduct yourself that way.
So, being a child of someone in the military actually made you more vulnerable to abuse because society had not created sufficient administrative structures to require civilized behavior of everyone present.
And then another problem. You had your parents who followed orders, like the military wives. My mother was expected to be a certain way, wherever she went, off the base or on the base. But when, as a child, you ask your parent, why do we have to do this? The other kids aren't doing this. They're the ones attacking us. And the average military kid will tell you, our parents didn't tell us. That's just the way it is what you would hear. I can give you a perfect example.
So they never answered your question?
No, never answered our question.
So on one hand, we have society not responding to conflicts between kids because some are in the military and some are not, and everyone just wants the problem to go away without being addressed. And so something needs to be done in that respect, but behind all of that, there's also, in addition for more dialogue about, and more accountability for all the other kids. On one hand, I wouldn't want to put the military standard on everyone, but on the other hand, I don't think the military kids should have a different standard. I think there should be a uniform standard. Should it be as high as what's in the military? Not. That may be a complex question for another time. One of the things I guess I was hoping to get to in talking about the role of the military within society is, and granted there is not going to be complete agreement on this, we're not going to solve everything in a half-hour discussion. should the military be defensive only, never used for economic or political purposes?
I believe the United States government has been used in the last 50 years for political reasons and economical.
And I think it's very difficult to maintain a sense of honor when politics and economics are what's behind it.
Okay, Russia, United States, and every other major country, including India, have nuclear weapons. You take two 2-year-olds and put them in a room together.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one has all of his toys, and the other one's new to the house. And he's told, well, I want to play with that because I brought mine too. But you tell him he can't play with his because he's playing with it not to your standards.
So, to cut to the chase, considering how many countries already have nuclear weapons, there shouldn't be as much concern about one more nation having them. But what I would say as a person who aspires to mutually respectful, peaceful global community, I would say the real goal is getting to where nobody has nuclear weapons.
Correct.
But as long as some countries insist on maintaining them, you're kind of a hypocrite to say that somebody else can't have theirs.
That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
And for Christians at least, the thing to remember is that the sin Jesus attacked more than any other, bar none, was hypocrisy.
Correct.
And that is so overlooked in Christianity these days.
Well, it's overlooked in life, period.
In life, period.
You
I
know-
did have a previous show I did with a Muslim imam where we talked about why is hypocrisy not only a Christian problem, that for every belief system you can name, there's such a difference between the deeds
Well,
and the creeds.
instead of us arguing that we're going to threaten North Korea if they do this or this, what we should be doing is sitting down discussing how all of us can come in peace so we don't have to have this discussion about another country trying to having their nuclear arms because we have ours. Because if it was me, I may get in trouble for this, but this is my opinion. If I'm the dictator of North Korea and you're telling me that I can't do my arms testing, but yet 50 years ago or 40 years ago or 70 years ago you were doing yours and you still have them. What makes you self-righteously right to tell me not to, when we should be sitting down together as all nations to discuss that we need to disarm, period?
It's probably unconventional and very controversial, but I guess my answer to the thing would have been, to the whole conflict struggle, would be to, instead of saying, yes, you can go ahead with your nuclear testing, to grant North Korea a representative on the task force, on the global task force, working toward the, if there is such a word, the denuclearization of the world.
My interpretation
At the present time, it's to the best of my knowledge, there is no task force for the denuclearization of the world.
No, well, we have to remember what we went through with Russia. We were supposed to downgrade ours, and they were supposed to downgrade theirs.
I don't, as I recall, it didn't get too far.
It didn't get anywhere.
But that's where, to me, the better idea would be to move toward peace by saying everyone who has a stake gets to be part of the force that does the inspections and sees the denuclearization of the world.
Correct.
At the moment, we don't have such a program in process. I think we need it, but we don't have it. But that would be a way that I would involve those countries who feel threatened by somebody else's nuclear weapons, is to say, well, you can be in charge of getting rid of our nuclear weapons. But by putting them on that committee, it's not just that they're getting rid of our nuclear weapons, they're getting rid of everybody's nuclear weapons, and they have a responsibility to the world to remove all nuclear weapons. Ours, theirs, everybody's.
But you have to remember, this person, let's say, this person in France, this person in Germany, this person in India, and you're going to say, why? Why should I? Well, I mean, what's the purpose? The purpose is peace.
Having a peaceful, mutually respectful global community. But we're wrestling with the problem of that not being a common value of the people of the world. You know, that not everybody wants a peaceful global community.
In my opinion, the only time that the world itself will come completely together, just on basis, is when we have a mutual enemy. When all of us have a mutual enemy.
When we have a common cause.
A common cause or a mutual enemy. Either way.
I don't think it's necessary, but it's very probable that that's the only way it would ever play out. Our conversation has kind of gone all over the map, but I guess I've seen, I'm sure lots of people have seen the poster or bumper sticker, whichever form it's in now, something about joining the military so that you can go to foreign countries, meet exotic people, and kill them. And I don't think that has anything to do with the honorable military that your father served. And I mean, not the way it has with so many atrocities since that time.
You have to remember also that when my father joined now, there was still segregation there too.
Lots and lots of problems at home.
Then there was a lot of segregation. Even in Vietnam. I mean, Vietnam kind of brought them more together, but it still has its segregated areas. I had a commander in Puerto Rico. He held my father's rank up from Master Sergeant for over 4.5 years because he didn't like my father's complexion, because my father looked too much like he was Caucasian, but his wife was African American, where I took more after my mother, and anyone else that was my darker complexion was allowed to have their rank continued. So my father was discriminated because he was of light complexion, being mixed with African American. When my uncle and cousins were on the base with us, they all went at the same time, so we would end up being a family stationed together, real family. And the darker ones in our family of darker complexion would go ahead and get their rank. When my father returned to the United States in Andrews Air Force Base.
But the problem is that the categorization was preventing all of these people from seeing who you really were.
Correct.
And showing respect for who you really were.
As a person.
As persons, as individuals, as a family trying to make your way through life.
And you have to remember, it's like just simply fact of saying, don't judge a book by its cover.
And beware, and that's where I sometimes tell people, don't chase the categories.
That's right.
Because you won't find any truth in them. You'll only find generalizations that make you blind to other important information. To wind up on just some concluding thought or two, I guess. If we're going to have a soldier as a regular member of society, we don't want to obsess over how many people have you killed in battle, were the orders you given honorable or not. I mean, this is a person who is at the heart of really complex issues that people have very strong feelings about on both sides. Somehow, in our interaction, we have to find a way to still be human.
Mm-hmm. But you also have to remember that when a soldier comes home now, or when a soldier would come home from a war that we didn't win, or soldiers that are coming home from Iraq, the things that were promised to them when they went, such as my job will still be here, my family will still have medical if something happens to me. These things are not kept by
the government is breaking its promises to them.
Yes.
And that's an outrage also.
Right. And that is a terrible outrage.
And I guess my only other comment on war is that essentially nobody ever really wins.
No.
But it's just, what is it? I don't remember who said it, but it doesn't determine who's right, it only determines who's left.
Correct.
I guess to end on a hopefully positive note, a quote I still value, and it applies to a lot more than just the military. And I want to say Jimi Hendrix, but when the power of love overcomes the love of power, the world will know peace.
I wish it would happen now.
We have to keep moving in that direction. Thank you very much for this discussion.
I've enjoyed it.
I hope we've given people some good things to think about. It's definitely a dialogue that needs to go on and on and on in a lot of new directions.
And that things need to change, and that the military has to remember that it's not just the soldier that's fighting, it's the family too. And the children have the right to have the answers to questions from their parents. To
Well, and I would
explain to
even
them.
say the citizens have a right to know what in the hell their government is doing. In any case, that's a whole nother subject.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thank you for watching.